Hello, you absolutely amazing friends. I am so honored to be here with amazing expert Sheena Kane. How you doing, Sheena Kane?
Oh, hello, Edward. Hello, everyone. Not too bad. Yourself?
Sheena, it's so good to hear you and it's so good to see you back. We've missed you. How have you been all these many months?
Oh, very busy. Been working on a government contract, which is really good. Always good to do something new and different and learn a bit and make new friends.
Well, there you go. Well, we're glad to have you back on the networking scene. And I just want to ask you, tell us very quickly what you do and how you help people and companies.
Okay, well, essentially, I'm a fair work expert. So I work with companies to make sure that they treat their people correctly, pay them properly, make sure they get the right entitlements, and do the right thing by their staff in general.
Wow, fantastic! Now it's a great job. It's you're helping protect people and companies, and again, of course, not asking for any confidential details. And this, of course, is a live being streamed through LinkedIn. We love LinkedIn, but you deal with some absolute crazy stuff out there, don't you? We've had a lot of chats off cameras. The stuff you deal with sounds like almost a setup for a joke at times. It's insane.
Yes, I think there's an old saying in occupation health and safety circles, there's no such thing as common sense. And with one of the companies that I deal with, they had an employee who was during the summer working in a regional area on a doing traffic control up there and decided to pour petrol onto the road and set fire to it, even though it was about a 30-odd degree day in the middle of summer in the middle of the bush. And it's like, whatever you think people cannot, will not do, somebody will do it.
So just so I understand it, actually, so just so I completely get it, they were just working and they just decided to pour petrol on the road and light it. That's pretty normal, isn't it? We all do that, right?
Apparently, there's a small discussion around how do you tell the difference between petrol or diesel. And he decided setting fire to the petrol was a way to demonstrate it rather than the umpteen other ways you could tell.
Yeah, so because diesel, of course, almost is like, it's almost an oil, isn't it? It's quite
Yes.
a heavy sort of petroleum mix, right?
Very unrefined. It stinks. And I know because I'm married to a diesel mechanic, it's got its own smell and it'll feel a lot oilier too, even if you're not sure, just like, yep, that'll be the other dead giveaway.
But of course, a better way of doing it, at least in this person's mind, is let's pour it on a road and ignite it and see what happens.
Yep. Yeah, very lucky not to start a bushfire that day.
Awesome. So this person poured on a road and lit it, and then I take it someone reported them to the employer saying they've been lighting fires in the middle of roads?
Yes, funnily enough, it's something that will get your co-workers offside as well.
Now, how do you deal with a situation like that? How do you deal with someone who just, I suppose, lighting fires? Where do you begin with that, Sheena?
Well, you sit down and ask them why. This is what's been reported to us. Why? So you've got to try and get their side of the story and just see what was happening and convince them that it's a good idea not to do this again.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, awesome. So please don't set roads alight during bushfire season just to prove a point.
Yep.
Wow, incredible. Now, I just want to say a big thank you to our fans. We've got a few fans coming in. Great seeing you all. Please smash that like, share, and comment and say hello. We love Sheena Kane. I was going to ask you, tell us some other crazy things you've seen over the years. What are some of the most craziest, wackiest stories? I like that one. People just setting roads alight. That's a good one. I never thought you'd say that. What else have you seen lately?
Let's see. There can be a lot of problems around bullying, harassment, all sorts of issues you have. But I remember a long time ago, I was working for a recruitment company and we actually dealt with a lot of people very long-term unemployed, and sometimes you get feedback from potential employers as to why they weren't perhaps getting jobs. And I remember there was one gentleman, he's well into his 60s or, still well and fit enough, and it was a job just quite simply sorting cherries. You need to pick out the bad ones so that by the time they get to, the grocers, they're nice. And during the job interview, he told the potential employer that he had previously punched a boss and would quite cheerfully do so again. So it gave us a bit of feedback as to why he may not have been doing well in his job interviews.
Got it. So he was basically, on a funny note, the Australian criminal hero celebrity Chopper Read, good old Chopper Read, right?
Yep.
I don't know. I know I'm a bit late to the party. I know he died a long time ago. I actually recently watched a Chopper film, and I've been watching Chopper Read interviews. And what's funny about that, there's actually a satire. Chopper Read's actually starring in a satire of himself where he does these mock job interviews and he pulls guns on people and threatens them. Like it's actually Chopper basically satirizing himself. So it almost sounds like this guy, but this guy's serious. He's not kidding. He literally has said in job interviews, I've punched bosses before.
Yep. Yeah, I don't think he meant any direct threat to the person who was interviewing him. It's just, unfortunately, he wasn't socially very savvy.
Well, yeah. So it's like, there you go. So I'm going to say that's crazy. Now, I was going to ask you, Sheena, right? When stuff goes wrong at work, right, be it sexual harassment, some kind of weird psychopath, someone decides to do advanced combustion experiments on public roads, do you get that weird phone call or that weird email saying, Sheena, we need you? What actually happens there?
Okay, so from there, a lot of them, it is current clients I've got, and they'll be like, yep, you need to call me straight away. Others will be, they contact me and like, yep, we're having a bit of a problem. We're getting feedback from employees. So from there, I contact the company. Usually owner, I usually work with small to medium businesses. And we talk through what's been happening, what are they aware of. And we also, I guess, I play a bit of devil's advocate and try and think of reasons why a person might be behaving a certain way. So I want to find out something about, their background, how long have they been with the company, what are some of the factors there that we need to look at. And also very much looking at, what are we doing in terms, or what is the company doing in terms of, training and supporting its employees. But from there, it's very much about getting... I guess so, talking to people and finding out, okay, what's really happening out there? Are we dealing with perhaps a rumor that's gotten big? Are we dealing with, something that's been blown out of proportion, or are we dealing with really problem behaviours? And from there, what's the best way to tackle that? Terminating somebody's employment should usually be a last option. So we need to look at ways that we can, I suppose, steer the person in the right direction and help both sides feel supported.
Yeah, it's fun. And again, I remember talking to you off camera about this. And obviously, I'll just censor the company's name to protect them. Actually, quite a good company. But before I was obviously a LinkedIn guy years ago, one of my jobs, I actually had to look after a team of people. And when I actually started the job, I was told about, and I was actually in my late 20s at that point, and I had a staff member who was on their way to retirement, I think in their late 50s, like they weren't far from retirement.
Yep.
And I was told that I need to fire this person right away, right, upon taking this role. And okay, so I got the job, really happy, great promotion, really happy about it, this is before I went crazy from PTSD and lost everything, but I had a few good years until I lost it. That's another story though. And I remember everyone told me I need to fire this lady. And it's the first thing I did was I went to HR and started talking to HR. And the HR person, amazing lady, you'd like her, kind of like your twin sister. She turned around and said to me saying, Ed, you just can't fire people like that. You need to sort of investigate and find out what's going on. Well, it was interesting. I actually sat down with this lady and had a good chat with her. And it turned out that, a lot of people accused her of poor performance. And she actually hasn't had a direct manager in over 6 months. In other words, she had no manager. She was literally it was a big organization. She was literally the office cat roaming from one place to the other. She's never had a direct manager to actually look after her. And it was funny. I was told to fire this lady and she hasn't even had a boss. And it was just a bizarre situation. When I spoke to her, she was like she's like the nicest lady ever. And what basically the upshot of it is that we just ended up managing her and she turned into a really good employee. And then a month later, no one wanted to fire her. Have you heard of bizarre situations like that?
Not quite like that. One of the things that often used to happen where I used to work in a phone room that provided industrial relations advice. It was, a chamber of commerce. And again and again and again, and I especially remember one co-worker in particular, Juliana, you'd hear and she'd say, have you spoken to the employee? Why haven't you spoken to the employee? So quite often nobody has gone to that person and said something as simple as, you can't do this. And I must admit, I've found, often at times in my own working life, staff training consisted of, you shouldn't have done that if you'd have told me. So you don't need to write, big, long, fancy job descriptions or things like that, but quite often just making sure somebody does get, the guidance and the training and the instructions that they need. We don't always learn by osmosis.
Yeah, I'm going to say absolutely fascinating, and you got me all thinking. And I was going to ask you, why does that, in fact, a good question, and I've got my own answer to this, but your answer will be way more on the point. Why do most companies suck at training? Like, I come from a marketing background, and most companies suck at marketing. I'm allowed to say that. But I know a lot of friends in HR, and a lot of companies suck at training. They suck at inductions. Why is that? Why are so many companies awful at training? Why do you think that is?
It's very hard to say. And at first I thought it was because I started my working life as an unskilled labourer. So if you needed somebody that would just show up with a pulse and get on with the job, I was your person. So I've done, picking and packing and cleaning and all sorts of jobs. People seem to think you're just going to pick up the job by osmosis, seems to be the most common thing. People tend to forget, I think, a lot of the time what it's like to be new on the job and just really not know how to get things done. What's the right way of doing things in this place? It takes a lot of empathy, some experience to actually say, well, actually, here's how we need to treat new people in our organisation, that they don't automatically know how to do things, and more particularly how to do things our way. So you really need, and I think we have a big problem. Our way of rewarding people is to promote them, and maybe they shouldn't be people leaders. They should be going into more skilled roles, perhaps, if they're very good technically, but we don't train people who are managing people in how they need to do that. We don't give them the skills. We don't guide them quite often, but it's the way we reward people for actually doing a good job.
Now, I want to talk to you about nepotism, right? And I'm going to, again, I don't want to get myself in trouble, but I used to work
for the whole family. Yep.
There you go. I don't want to get into trouble, but I used to work for the government. We'll leave it there. And everything was nepotism driven. So it wasn't, look, you had to do the base job properly, but ultimately the people who got promoted were the people who were liked the most or friends with the managers. Now, interestingly, as I've gone through, even though I've been in business for a while now, LinkedIn stuff and all that, for the years I worked as an employee, every company I saw promoted people not on merit, but on the basis of nepotism. In other words, whoever is the most liked gets the promotion or the job. And I've heard a lot of companies go on about we're all about results. I never believed that. To me, it was all about nepotism. Am I just a cynic, or is that a fair comment?
No, it's a very fair comment. We tend to, if somebody makes us feel good about ourselves, and quite often what you'll see are things like what we call the halo effect. So I might just happen to be friends with a lot of women in their 40s and 50s that live, out in the country. And you know what? We just happen to have so much in common. Who'd have thought? And organisations are political entities that, as much as we like to say, and be politically correct and say, look, we hire on merit, we promote on merit, we train people on merit, we don't. We are actually dumb animals for the most part, and it's why we have a situation where we live in a country that you're more likely to meet a CEO called Andrew than you are to meet a female CEO. Because we hire and we promote people that are like our own selves. We're comfortable with that.
Right, so you mean by that, I've heard that before. So you mean that because more men are in leadership positions, they're more likely to promote men. Is that what you kind of mean with that statement?
Yeah, yeah, and that they don't consciously do it for the most part, but you tend to hang around and feel comfortable with people who are like yourself quite often.
So you naturally will hang out with people that are like you, and therefore you're going to be more likely to promote those characters because they're the best ones for the job, right? They're the people that get the culture the most, right, Sheena?
That's it, and it maintains the status quo, which people are also very comfortable with.
Wow, that's just really.
And statistics do show that companies that actually have more diversity within them actually have much better profits. And we're not sure what the cause and effect relationship is there, but we know that there's a correlation there. But it's
Gotcha.
it's hard for people, and like I said, people aren't consciously going, "Yep, I want to promote, another middle-aged white woman into, be one of my co-workers." But as I said, we tend not to be very good at challenging ourselves quite often.
Wow, absolutely fascinating. Now, another one I want to ask you, right? And this is an interesting one I hear about a lot. Sexual harassment, it's terrible. We condemn it in every way whatsoever. I'm sure anyone watching this condemns it too. Now, the interesting quagmire, and this is an interesting one. Say, be a woman's at work, she's getting harassed. It's awful, she should report it. But however, there's been many situations of women who've been harassed in the workplace sexually. They report it and they end up being framed as the problem. We've spoken about this before, right? How do women protect against that? If you're a woman being harassed and you want to do something about it, how do you do something about it without them basically framing you or scapegoating you or throwing you under the bus, which unfortunately happens?
Unfortunately, yes, it's a topic that makes a lot of companies very uncomfortable. They're afraid of tackling it. And unfortunately, what you see is, look, I suppose there's all different ways that sexual harassment can happen. Sometimes it is quite simply, it's, unreciprocated feelings, but a lot of the time where it is very nasty sexual harassment, it is often an abuse of power. So that person who is committing the sexual harassment is often well known, liked and tolerated within the organisation. And so the person saying, no, actually, I've got a problem here, is seen as being the problem. It can be, look, I'd always suggest in the first instance, or if you feel comfortable, is very much being quite assertive with that person and saying, I don't like this. It's not appropriate. It's not lawful. I do not want you to do this again. So I do suggest make it very clear to that person the behaviour is unwelcome. That's also if you feel safe to do so, if you feel confident. It's very easy by the time, you're my age to actually feel comfortable saying things like that, although I have done for a long time. It's a very individual thing, and it's very difficult if you feel like you're going to lose your job. From there, it would be making a formal complaint, but it's also perhaps sometimes realising, as much as we need to rail against these things, if you're not being listened to, rather than subject yourself to potential further harm or other kinds of bullying, because I have found that to be an issue as well. You might make it very clear that, the sexual harassment is not appropriate, but if it's a nasty person, they'll find other ways to bully you instead that aren't sexual harassment. You might be better off to take your bat and your ball and play somewhere else. Otherwise, it will wear you down. It will destroy you. And one of the terrible things I've been reading about with sexual harassment recently, because of, like many topics, you've got to keep researching it when you work in this field, is increasingly looking at intersectionality, which you would sort of, statistically, we still have an issue that young, attractive women are far more likely to be sexually harassed. And what we're finding is that but by and large, it's mostly women that make sexual harassment complaints, about 70% of women, or complaints come from women, but it also leaves a fair bit of them from men as well. When you look at apprentices in workplaces, you can see how that can happen. Again, it's that power play. But over 90% of sexual harassment complaints are made about men. So we've still got a problem with power dynamics. And what we're also seeing is there are other factors that will predispose somebody or make it more likely that they're going to be sexually harassed. So if they come from a different racial background, if they have a disability, and also if there are transgender issues, a person is far more likely to be sexually harassed than what they would be on average. So we're very much
the predator perhaps sees them as a softer target, therefore is more comfortable doing that.
That's what we're seeing. It is again that play out of people politics, that they feel like they can get away with it.
Wow, absolutely fascinating. Now, another interesting one that I saw today, and toxic, again, we're talking about toxic people here. And as you know, even though I'm a LinkedIn guy, I love the whole the topic of toxic people. I just love it, right? Call me morbidly obsessed with it. I don't know what's wrong with me. Now, interestingly, one of our friends, Manny Padisetti, we love Manny Padisetti, he did a great post today that made me look in the mirror and feel rightfully uncomfortable. Because what he was talking about was that when you fight with toxic people, you become toxic yourself. And interestingly, back in my past, I come from an Arabic background. I'm a very competitive sort of guy. And whenever I had toxic behavior in the workplace, I unfortunately would out-toxic that person at times. I'd always win, but in a way, I would just out-toxic that person. So whilst my crusade I saw as quite just and righteous, I actually left organizations, and looking back at it as an old man, I'm actually quite old these days, Sheena. As I look back on it, right, I kind of realized, yes, they were toxic first, but I ended up becoming the bigger toxic monster and eating them up. And it got me thinking, because when you're surrounded by toxic people, even if you fight them, you end up becoming toxic like them. Can you talk about that a bit more? Because, again, I think I was wrong in hindsight, but that's what I did. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the whole toxic people sort of agenda here.
It is. Unfortunately, some people that, if I said to you, imagine like, oh, when you said such and such that hurt my feelings, I'd rather you didn't. Most normal people are going to take that on board and go, look, I'm really sorry, I won't do that again. I apologise. However, when you work in a really toxic environment, it does, if one person does this, you've got to do that. And it keeps up, and you end up in a whole environment where to survive, you've actually got to become one of those people. And WorkSafe do actually recognise that it becomes environment. And unfortunately, you do, and I've been in these environments before myself. If you're going to survive, you've got to become like them to actually survive. And also you can become quite proud of being able to survive in that environment and thrive and actually get your job done. But you cannot go under the radar. I realised, after working in one factory that was particularly bad, I went to work in another factory, a couple of jobs later, and I remember I was talking to a co-worker, a young lady, and she's going, I'm like, what? You said that word again. What? Oh, okay.
What?
I realised that part of surviving in that environment I had been in is if you weren't putting holes in the ozone layer with CFCs coming out of your mouth every other word, you're going to get eaten alive.
So you just, without realising, had a bit of profanity that upset this other lady.
Yep. Yeah, and wasn't thinking about it, wasn't filtering it. It had become such a second nature to get by in that environment, to actually put up that kind of an armour so people didn't feel like they could, make a meal out of you.
Yeah, it's interesting. And again, I say, and it's funny, I say this with shame, but again, I'm here to be honest, not protect my ego. But I remember in this one environment I was in, it was the most, the actual owner of the company, I'm not kidding, by the way, actually went to prison for tax evasion for a whole year, right? So this is not just Ed's opinion. It was actually right up there, right?
Yeah.
So it's a very toxic company, and yeah, they basically got shut down by the AFP. It was right up there, right? Now, interestingly, and I hate to say it, but I'm just going to tell the truth. Very toxic environment, and I became a very toxic person in there because you're right. I had to do that to survive. I would actually swear at people. I would yell at people. I would tell them to get the F out of my office. I would call people stupid. If someone insults me, I'd insult them 3 times back, right? And I actually became the most toxic person there. And I never started off like that. It was all my toxicity was all a reaction to what I was being given, right? Because if I wasn't toxic, I couldn't do my job. I had to be toxic to do my job, right? And I look back on this, again, I say this shamefully, but it's funny that in hindsight, I should have just left the place because, again, if you hang out with toxic people, they're going to make it toxic, aren't they? No matter which way you cut that tomato, it's going to be a slice, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting what you're saying, that it very much came from the top. I remember with this company, there was actually a meat substitution racket back in the late 80s, early 90s that the former head of this company had been involved in.
I remember that. I remember hearing about that. Continue.
Yes, so that's the kind of, I guess you'd say, the head of the company and where your example is coming from. And it's not like you go, well, for most of us, we don't go home at night and sort of think, here's what I need to do to survive here. You get drawn into it and become part of it. But, I mean, at least if you're looking back over your shoulder and going, it probably wasn't the right thing and you've learned from it, at least you've got some perspicacity there that you have moved on and made a better person of yourself. It's whereas other people, it's they're always going to be, unfortunately, like that. But it was interesting that I know I ran a shift for a time on my own, and it's good. It was afternoon shift, so I was the only boss there. We had our own little microculture, and then when that shift got cut, and a handful of them got put back onto the regular day shift, that they've come to me and gone, oh my goodness, it's so different. So it was possible to build this little microcosm within it and have people would actually be nice to each other, but the amount of difference that they saw just because they started work at a different time with different people, the difference it made.
Wow, just incredible. Now, Sheena, love your work. I've got to say, I really appreciate you. To all our viewers out there, be it you're watching the recording or live, please smash that like, share, and comment. Sheena, I'd just love to hear any closing thoughts. If you want to share any thoughts of us, any great stories, anything, now's your chance.
I guess it's one of the things with, I suppose, going from a very rough work background to that, to then actually, I suppose, using my powers for niceness. It's you take that experience and you build on it. You think, well, okay, what can I actually do? And it's really great to, now have colleagues and friends that I now work with, and we respect each other, we trust each other, we've got really good relationships through positivity, through building each other up and bringing the good out in people. It is possible to do that.
Wow.
And I watched, a good friend of mine that we used to do vineyard work. We're out in all weathers, in all sorts of situations, no toilets, no running water, no shelter. And what I saw with Nikki, it was a great example to me, that she would always remember the humanity in people. She'd bring along, things like soap and a big container of water so people could wash their hands. She made sure that they sat down and had a proper break and things like that. So even when things are, I suppose, not the best, it's trying to bring the positives that you can to the workplace. And I think that's been a great example for me from Nikki.
Oh, brilliant. Love it, Sheena. And just before you go, and to everyone watching, please like, share, and comment. Great having Sheena with us. Just before you go as well, Sheena, how do you help companies and how can they get in touch with you?
Okay, how do I help companies? So a lot of it is by let's make sure we get minimum terms and conditions correct. And that's not just because you don't want, the Fair Work Ombudsman knocking on your door in the middle of the night. It's also about making sure that people are valued for the job that they do. And from getting those minimums correct, we look at actually building your culture to the point where you actually have a good functioning team. People understand what's expected of them. And a lot of that isn't just, part of it is by offering a helpline, but also by going into people's organisations, working with them, talking to them, getting to know people. And they can get in touch with me. I guess, my LinkedIn details are there if people want to actually, talk about fair work. And I guess that's a big part of it. We just actually talk about, what are your issues and what do you want to do?
Brilliant. Sheena, love. And of course, people can add you on legendary LinkedIn.
That's it. Yes.
Oh my God. Sheena, big thank you. And also too, you're speaking at our Melbourne meetup on Friday, face-to-face to a room of brilliant people, I understand.
I am. So if you want to actually put up with me, in person, it'll be a great time to come along and meet.
Oh, Sheena, we don't put up with you. We love having you with us. And Sheena, I know you're a busy lady. Thank you for spending your evening with us.
Oh, no, thank you very much, Edward. I know you really care about your people here.
Love your work. Bye, Sheena. Bye, everyone. Like, share, comment. Appreciate you, winners.